most of my career has been on the client side. A long time ago, I was one of the first people that was a founding member of a market research department at a tiny little company in Seattle called Microsoft. Was there for about 14 years and kind of went from almost starting the market research function to managing a budget of over $100 million. And that's because the company grew that rapidly over the time that I was there. But you learn a lot when you see that kind of growth. And I've been out of Microsoft for about 7 years now. We still work very closely with them. And I'd like to share kind of a model of where we're hoping the industry goes and where the kind of change we're trying to drive. Is there a slide? So I'm going to talk about this 360 approach, and I think somebody mentioned earlier that there's information that kind of bypasses the market research department and goes directly to decision makers, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a thing. Things happen when market researchers don't add the value that they need to add, and that's what they're brought in to add. So I'm going to talk about how market research departments can embrace this 360 concept of data from all sources. And also, since this is a 15-minute presentation, give you a very quick 1, 2, 3-step approach for how to put it into practice. It's almost like a lather, rinse, repeat 3 steps. Most of you guys, most of the department, they're at crossroads. For the most part, they're kind of well respected and kind of do their thing, and they're known as the customer survey experts, and they continue doing their stuff. And as companies are getting more and more kind of trying to embrace customers more, there's more and more demand for these kinds of things. However, everyone I've spoken to, and I've spoken to some of the major research companies, and I was one of the largest research buyers, everyone is struggling to increase impact. I think somebody talked about the proverbial seat at the table. It's not happening because, very honestly, researchers aren't geared to have that seat at the table. There are a couple of things going on. There is just a lot of information. There's a lot of information going directly to decision makers, and researchers really don't know how to handle it. And as companies get more and more data-driven, with all this data out there, no one wants to wait for market research to come and tell them, what they learned from their surveys. Things happen instantaneously, and you're seeing that, and we're living in that world. Now, the good news for the market research managers in most companies is that they have the potential to actually be these drivers of change. There's no other group in most companies that has the mandate, the tools, the budget, the funding, and the only job of staying ahead of customers and competitors and market trends. They have no other jobs. They don't have to build products. They don't have to ship products. This is their only job. So, and they have a pretty large budget to do it, and it depends on how they think about research and how they think about information. This is a slide I've been using probably, I used this for the first time, this Research 3.0 concept about 8 or 9 years ago at another market research conference when I was at Microsoft. Reason I used it was because that is kind of, at Microsoft, we always used to get it right on the 3rd try. And the same thing with research. I think the industry has evolved over the years. Most companies are kind of in this middle bucket. They use research data. They deliver insight, whatever that means, nuggets of information. I'm not exactly sure what they mean, but they deliver some stuff that's hopefully insightful. They're very good at partnerships, partnerships with their internal constituents, partnerships with their research vendors, and they do a really good job at that. And they're also, getting smarter and more collaborative about, tying in results from different studies. And so they're generally moving in the right direction. But to actually be an agent of change, you move to this Research 3.0, where you're not thinking about data, you're thinking about information, no matter where it sits. You're not delivering insights, you're driving impact, you're actually influencing change. You're moving away from the partnerships you have and the relationships you have internally and externally to focusing on decisions. So these are the things that hopefully we can move on, we can move to faster. So this 360 approach is what I'm going to talk about. Is why is it important? And put yourself in the shoes of one of your general managers or one of the people that's actually making decisions based on information. Somebody's got to make a marketing plan, or somebody's got to build a new product. They sit with the research department and they get some brand tracker or customer satisfaction scores. The very next meeting, they sit with the customer support team and get customer information from a different lens. Then they speak with the sales team and they get customer information from a different lens. They speak with the PR team, they get customer information from a different lens. They speak with customers themselves and they hear firsthand, and that actually lasts a lot with them. Now, none of these are bad sources of information. They're all relevant, all valuable, but they're very siloed. And real intelligence only comes from kind of a well thought out, grounded, triangulated view of information across all these different sources. And as researchers, I think we need to do that. It's hard to do that because we're not trained to do that, but it's something that more and more companies are doing, and we're seeing more and more companies do that. I'm going to talk about how we can actually move in that direction. But before that, let's talk about what's different about 360 than from traditional approaches. The first thing is it actually changes the orientation of what a research manager should be. Just recently, a couple of months ago, I co-presented at the market research event conference with Microsoft, talking about that case study. And their goal was very clear. They have about 100 researchers in the central organization, and they found out that about 70% of the time spent by the research manager was on project-related stuff, project management, vendor management, cleaning data, checking stuff, finding errors, just doing stuff that they should not be doing. And 30% was actually spent on doing what they were supposed to be doing, which is driving impact, delivering value to the business. And they wanted to flip that model around. So that's one thing about a 360 approach. The second thing is it's actually not just putting together information from different sources. It's just orders of magnitude higher. You have a 10x increase probably in the analytical effort necessary to find patterns, to recognize patterns, to build predictive models, and that just takes a lot of muscle. Then the language changes. Somebody talked about language just earlier. Now you don't talk about what this survey said and what this scale said. You start focusing on different things like triangulating information from different sources. You talk about storytelling. You talk about data warehousing. You just talk about all these different things that you didn't think about as traditional market researchers who were really, really good at conducting customer surveys. And of course, the emphasis changes again on things like data warehousing, data synthesis, data analysis, dashboards. People talk about visualization and infographics and all these new ways of communicating information very effectively. So, putting 360 into practice, how do you do this? Again, it's actually longer than a 15-minute talk, but I'll try to cover it in the whatever 5 minutes I have left here. So for some of the challenges with this kind of 360 approach, these are all the different data. Most of you have tons and tons of customer surveys, many of them saying the same thing, many of them conflicting with each other. But you don't know what's there. You haven't really put it together. You have all this other information, secondary information that you purchase, or people write reports on the government reports, just whatever else is out there. Social media is its own beast. It's got tons of information, and it's actually very honest information. I think someone is probably more likely, using the United Airlines example this morning, probably more likely to speak honestly about their experience on Twitter or Facebook than they are on a survey. So that's another thing. There's behavioral data. There's more and more information from websites, and oh, by the way, the guys who run the websites, they do surveys also. But honestly, how can they do surveys? They're not market researchers, but they get good information. So there's all this stuff that's sitting out there. So that's one of the problems is how do you break these data silos and put information together? The second thing is you need different skill sets, because interpreting social information is very different than interpreting survey information. It's very different than competitive information or industry reports. And so you've got diverse data sets, diverse skill sets that are required. And somebody brought up earlier, oh, you need all this yesterday. You cannot wait for weeks and months. You need all this stuff right away. Oh, and by the way, I don't have any more money to spend on it, so I need to do this with my existing budget. So how many of you can relate to all of this? If you look at this three-step approach, the first step is actually, let's take all these different siloed data, all this disparate data that's sitting around, and put it together into one platform. It's a kind of a data in a platform where you can actually put all your market research surveys in, so you can actually look, have a left to right and end-to-end view of them. And then you can also link in all your other information from other sources. And you should be able to do that regardless of the source of data, regardless of whether research vendor A did the study or research vendor B did the study, or whether it's in a different kind of files type. It's very easy and possible to do. And then you need the flexibility to report it and present it in any way you want, because different people may want it differently. You have people are using tools like Tableau or just different kind of BI tools. So you need this flexibility at the front end. Taking this thought a little bit further, this technology platform that you actually put all your data sources into just needs to be very modular, scalable, flexible. It needs to let you integrate different data sources. And it actually needs to really, truly provide you information at your fingertips. So you can actually look across all of your information sources and provide an answer to a question within minutes, not within weeks. Most of the companies we deal with, they kind of have a hard time just accessing data they've paid for themselves. They conduct research, but they really don't own the information because it's sitting somewhere else, and then they've got to pay X thousand dollars to get just some simple cuts of data back from them. This kind of changes the model around and says, okay, this is your information from all your different surveys, no matter who did them, and they're all probably done in a good manner. And here's information that you can combine with from non-survey data sources, and then have it in a very usable, user-friendly, snappy manner. The second step for putting 360 into practice is getting the full range of skills under one roof. And there are different sets of skills, and it's really hard to find people that actually can say, okay, for secondary information, we need library scientists. It's a different skill set than data analysts. For looking at transactional data, again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a different skill set. So you've got to put all those skill sets under one roof, and then you've got to start looking at that box in the middle. You've got to analyze, synthesize, you've got to tell the story, you've got to visualize, and these are different. I can hand you a copy of the presentation. Don't worry about the photographs. But thank you, I'm flattered. What was that? I'm even more flattered. So if you just look at analysis and synthesis are two very different things. When you analyze something, you break it into pieces and you go deeper. When you synthesize, you take multiple pieces and put them together. Just that very difference has a very kind of a different orientation in how you think about information and data. And so anyway, the second part about 360 is putting all this stuff under one roof. And finally, the third part is probably the most controversial, which is kind of building this, what we call a dedicated extension team, but largely it is kind of flipping the model of market research over its head. So the research industry, the way it's currently designed and organized. So first of all, research managers in corporations are not hired to manage projects. They're hired to help think. The economic model of the research industry is this data collection plus model. You pay for data collection, and then you pay something on top of that. There's just a fundamental mismatch. This thing flips that model around so that you've got a team that becomes your arms and legs. It becomes the muscle behind the information that you already paid for and gathered, and actually becomes an extension of your team. And that truly allows research managers the freedom to go and impact the business and influence the business rather than spend time on the project management stuff. And this is kind of, it's almost like having a team of analysts on a retainer as opposed to, kind of the data collection model. So that's it, 3 steps, 15 minutes. To conclude, I think pretty much everyone kind of conceptually knows about a 360 concept and all this, all these multiple sources of information that are out there. The traditional approaches, honestly, are inconclusive, incomplete. They provide an incomplete view of customers. It's a partial view, and really, if market research managers want to have an impact, they cannot just rely on one source of information. An integrated 360 approach is probably the way to go. We've seen it actually very successful. Again, we presented we shared this publicly with Microsoft that they've had a 50x increase in the work they're doing with these extension teams. compared to anything else. And obviously, their budgets haven't grown 50x over the past few years. And basically, 360 can be delivered through a technology platform, assembling different skill sets, and having a service layer to support it. And that's it. Thank you very much. Any questions?